They tie our hands behind our back with my laces. One forces me to my knees. At that moment, I realized he was going to behead me. I mean, how graphic can I get here? And he's just plunging this machete into me. I can hear my bones crunch, ribs coming out of me. I'm soaked in blood. Can't breathe because of the vomit. I had over 30 broken bones, 18 slices in my body, collapsed lung, crushed sternum, dislocated shoulder, broken shoulder, bone splinters in my lungs, and a sliced diaphragm. And in that state, I walked over a mile.
Yeah, I found that really upsetting.
Yeah. Islam means submission. It doesn't mean peace. It's a primitive and barbaric culture. Look how these people treat their own families. Look how they treat their wives. It's a culture that loves and glorifies death. The same people who rape and butcher and slaughter and massacre. You have people like this on your streets in London. They're not suitable to be in this country. And no, it's not racist to say it. It's common sense. That is what makes Tommy such a beautiful human being.
The rape of our children could have been avoided. Like, you fucking animals that covered that up. You're as bad as the rapists yourselves. I want to say a quick thank you to our sponsors, Gold Seal. I use their products every single day, and now I finally get to work with them. I use their products for anti-inflammatory, reduced anxiety, better sleep, and mental clarity. I'm going to put a link to their website in the description, along with a 10% discount code for you to take advantage of. Go and have a look at their website, see if there's anything in there for you. I hope you enjoy this week's episode, and good health. Tal.
Liam.
Thank you for coming on. I want to put this in there immediately. The admiration that I have for you is enormous. Your strength, your courageousness. People are going to find out exactly what I mean and why I find you a very inspirational character. And we're going to get straight into it. You're a survivor of a terrorist machete attack, an attempted murder, and you had to pretend to be dead to stay alive. So we're going to go straight in.
I like that. Rather than, how are you? How was your flight? Let's get straight into the murder.
Well,
no, it's important because that's why I came over.
It is important. And I know how your flight was. You told me in there you had a nice meal and you've had an IPA. So I know how your flight was. But are you feeling, are you okay?
I'm fine. Every moment in its own right.
Okay. And you're feeling comfortable just to...
Totally.
To go for it.
I've come over for that purpose.
Okay.
Because I think there's a lot at stake for humanity, right? Because I've faced death. So I'll take you back to that day. 15 years ago, I live in Israel. I've been there 40 years, Jewish, born in Britain. And I was working as a tour guide, and I was guiding an American Christian lady. It was a Sabbath. Beautiful day. Like, we have a very dry land. So wherever there's a forest and a nature trail, it's like Israelis flock there. And we're walking along, just the two of us and my little dog, Peanut. And I remember a viewpoint, and we climb up the hill, and we're sitting on the top of the hill. And I get out these sunflower seeds. Do you guys eat sunflower seeds here? You give them the birds, right? But they're snacks in Israel. And we're chomping at sunflower seeds, and I'm giggling, and then 60 feet, 20 meters down the hill, in the bushes, I see something move. And look again, and I see two men crouched in the bushes. So I reach over to my friend, Christine, and I just say, shh, don't make a sound, because I didn't want them to see us. But one stands up, and he says in Hebrew, but with an Arabic accent, he says, 𝐬𝐮𝐿 have you got any water? Now, I'm looking where we are. We're on a nature trail, but there's no one around. We're in the state of Israel. We're not in any disputed areas. And I didn't want them to come, excuse me, to come any closer, because I thought maybe they're going to start harassing us or something. So I just said, oh, I wish, back in Hebrew. And they went away. Now, my friend only had arrived in Israel the previous day, and I didn't want to worry her. Right? So I said, let's just get back to the car. So we get up. And we're walking down the hill, and I'm thinking, well, what the heck were they doing there? Were they picking blackberries? So I was worried about a robbery, that they'd seen my backpack. So I just take out this little penknife. I always have it on me for peeling apples and breaking locks. No, that's not true. But when we're walking down the hill, she's behind me, And the little dog runs past and is like sniffing and catching flies. So I think it's okay. They must have gone. And I'm already planning what I'm going to do next. Suddenly, Christine screams. And as I turn around to see what's going on with her, one of them jumps on me from behind. I fall to the ground. I break my nose. And he's on my back. And I'm trying to turn over. And I manage to wiggle over. And he's now kneading up my chest. And I managed to like stab him in the balls, right? Just nick him very, very gently. But he's bigger than me. He's a big guy. He's bigger than you. And he takes away my knife. And he was actually wearing an Israeli police jacket and Israeli army trousers. And he puts his hand inside the Israeli police jacket. And I was confused, like, Israeli police jacket, but an army trousers. And I can see he's an Arab. And he takes out a machete. And this is, we talk about memory. This is all recorded as well because the police ended up taking these people back to the scene of the crime. The machete is 1 foot long and it's got a serrated edge. It's nearly a couple of inches wide. Liam, I mean, how graphic can I get here?
Do you know what? Not to make you feel uncomfortable in the least, because I really want you to feel very secure with me because I'm in full support. But so people get the full magnitude, I would encourage you be as graphic as you possibly are prepared to be. I will.
I think it's important because there's a lot at stake here. It's not just my story, right? We're going to talk about that. So when I see that machete, I mean, if I think about what was I feeling at that moment, what was I thinking? I mean, I pissed my pants. I'm like just shaking, not violently, but like a tremor. And I think more than anything, I break out in this sweat and my tongue feels like it's covered with sandpaper. This thirst just from nowhere. I just wanted to have some water. And I look around to see where Christine is, and she's a couple of meters away. And the other person has got his arm, wrist, arm like this, and he's got like a curved kitchen knife holding it to her throat. Then begins a process, which I can only describe as eternity. We're standing in one of the most beautiful places in Israel. It's the Jerusalem pines, and I can hear the birds chirping. I can hear crickets, and we're being held at knife point. And this goes on for half an hour. Finally, he takes my backpack and he starts like looking through it, and he pulls out an ID. I mean, in Israel, we all have IDs, and he could see from my ID that I'm Jewish. And then your heart's thumping. And I start to tell him, I said, we're both tourists. Oh, we're both Christian. Oh, do you want my car? I've got like a Mercedes. I had a Nissan Micra, but I just thought I'd tempt them with the car. Nothing is working. And I keep glancing at Christine, who is ashen-faced. And her mouth is slightly open. It's like this rectangle, forced, just in stone, and her chin is juddering, and her eyes, her pupils are actually black, just a total look of terror. And I don't understand what they want because I stabbed one of them in the nuts and he didn't stab me back, right? They've been messing around for like half an hour. Now he's got my ID and he comes up to me. One of them pulls away a little bit and he starts making a phone call, and I know some conversational Arabic. Because I've been in Israel for so long and I got Arab friends, and he's talking about a car. Where is the car? And it dawned on me then that we're going to be kidnapped. It's like, what the heck, what we're going to end up in Gaza. This is before October the 7th. And while he's on the phone, the other one says, in Hebrew, he says, take off your shoes. And I think, what do you want with my shoes? And he take out the laces. And they tie our hands behind our back with my laces. And then Christine had like a fleece jumper thing, sweater. They take it from around her waist and they hack it up and they gag us. He takes off my Star of David, takes off my sunglasses, and the two of us were standing side by side. And I'm aware that I'm in this, like I said before, this most incredible, beautiful place where there's so much wonder and amazing things to be seen. And we're like two cucumbers right next to each other. And I'm waiting for them to then push us down the hill or take us down the hill into this car, because he was talking about a car. But instead of that, they separate us by a couple of meters. And I'm very confused, like, what's going on? And then one forces me to my knees. And at that moment, I realized, wrongly, but I realized he was going to behead me. And it's like, how could I describe that moment? I was too scared to be frightened.
Numb.
It wasn't even, Liam, it was even beyond numb. It's like, you have a bath, what do you call it? Like a bathtub, right? You fill it with water, right? And when you take the plug out and you watch the water go, sorry, that probably came around really bad in the podcast, but the water goes down the plug really, really fast. That's what it's like. I'm that bathtub, and everything that I am is just emptied suddenly. There's nothing left of me. I'm just waiting for him to chop off my head, saw off my head, hack off my head. And the only thing I could say is just do it quickly. And then the next moment is, and I remember the sounds of this, what happened. I'm a musician, so sound is much more prominent with me. But it's like this cosmic, like a symphony of monotheism. They do the takbir, Allahu Akbar. Christine whimpers, Jesus save me. And, I threw up. And I just said the eternal creed of Israel, 𝐬𝐮𝐻 𝐬𝐻𝐫𝐿. And he stabs me in the back so hard, I fall to the ground. And I'm on my side, hands tied, gagged. And now he's leaning on me. And he's just plunging this machete into me. And I can hear my bones crunch. And because it's a serrated blade, it gets stuck in my bones. And it's not like a frenzy. It's not like, let's just do this quickly. They're smoking. They're having a cigarette, and it's all like at ease, and there's another one and another one. And the only thing I knew to do, or gambled on, so to speak, was to play dead. And I realized that people die with their eyes open. So I kept my eyes open, and I'm laying on the ground and tried not to move, wince. And while he's stabbing me and breaking my bones, I'm watching my Christian friend squirming, wiggling, try to avoid his knife, and he's just hacking her to death. And after, 17 stab wounds, I always thought it was 13, and then the police informed me not long ago. They said, what have you been saying, 13? You were stabbed 18 times. But after 17 times, they leave. And then there's that very, very strange Never Land, this otherworldly situation, right? I wasn't sure if I was dead or alive. I'm losing consciousness. And my ear is on the ground, and I feel these vibrations, and it's their footsteps, and they're coming back. And he rolls me over on my back. And now, I'll never forget this sunset. I'm looking up at these pine trees. It's a canopy of pines, and the sun is low, it's setting. It's around 4:30 in the afternoon. The sun sets early in Israel, and the sky is pink and orange and a little bit of purple. And I can see the sun, it's misty. And then I see the silhouette of a man's hand that God made, a man's hand, and I see the silhouette of the knife. And I watch him stab me in the chest. And that missed my heart by 4 millimeters. Now, they believe we're both dead. Christine's dead. And they leave. And I understood I've just got I wanted to do one last thing in life. And that was to die nearer where I parked the car so the police could find my body. I have ribs coming out of me. I'm soaked in blood. Can't breathe because of the vomit. And I'm on my side. I've got nothing to, force myself up with. Try getting up like that. Not even elbows, can't even do. And I kept trying to get up and falling down. Nothing hurts anymore. But I just wanted to sleep. And I knew if I slept, it would be death. So I tried 3 times. And on the 4th time, I actually managed to stand. And I could hardly believe it. Like, oh my gosh, I'm standing. So my goal is 1 step, 2 steps nearer to the car. And I turn my back on what's left of my friend. And barefoot, gag bound, step by step, I begin to walk. And look, I have to tell you how badly I was injured. I had over 30 broken bones. I had 18 slices in my body, up to 2.5 inches long, each one. Had a collapsed lung, crushed sternum, dislocated shoulder, broken shoulder blade, bone splinters in my lungs, and a sliced diaphragm. And in that state, I walked over a mile, and I got to this picnic area where there was still some families there, and they were packing up for the day, and they saw me, and the next thing I remember is this woman screams, and I managed to say in Hebrew, there's been a terror attack, then my friend's murdered. And that's it. I collapsed to the ground. I don't lose consciousness. And within a few minutes, I hear an army helicopter and the police, and then smell the rubber of the tires of the ambulance, and I'm rushed to hospital. And look, as a Brit by birth, I do love irony, and I always say this when I do public speaking. But I get to hospital, and no one's expected me to live. I'm rushed into the operating room. And the last words I hear before I'm operated on was from one surgeon to another. In Hebrew, the surgeon says, "Muhammad, give me that knife. Pass me the scalpel." It was a Muslim surgeon who saved my life. So that's important. I was, as I said, I was critically wounded. Christine's body was found the next day. It's been years of physical recovery or progress, ongoing psychological recovery. Months after the attack, I was in court. I had to go to court. They were arrested because of the DNA on my, you remember I stabbed him? Mm-hmm. So the police could swab that little tiny bit of his blood on my sleeve, because my shirt was just, you could wring out the blood. And they swabbed the DNA, and the terrorists were apprehended very quickly. So in court, this is very important. I'll fly anywhere to tell people this. And it's also on record in film, the Israeli police filmed this. When the judge said, he asked the terrorists, these Arab terrorists, why, Palestinian terrorists, why did you murder an American Christian? And they like shrugged and they smirked and they said, "Oh, we thought she was Jewish." So they were sentenced. And what happened actually, one of them had murdered another woman 10 months previously. And that murder hadn't been solved until the DNA link on so one got 120 years because he'd murdered 2 people. He got also for my attempted murder. They raped people. They shot at soldiers. The other one got 55. And at the moment, I mean, it's kind of, this interview will be dated soon, but I'm waiting to see if they will be released in a hostage deal. So that's the story, Liam. That's the beginning of the story.
I'm going to be honest with you.
Only.
It took every ounce of strength I've got not to cry when you were telling me that.
I could see, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, fucking hell.
That's the word. Give me your hand. Yeah, I don't usually say that on tape, but I'm with you.
And I apologise, because I'm supposed to be the strong one, but that is... Yeah, I found that really upsetting.
Yeah. It is upsetting.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Don't apologise for it, Liam.
I do apologise, because I don't normally do this, and it's my job to be strong for the guests, but yeah, that...
But there's strength in tears.
I found that very, very, very sad. So you've watched your friend get murdered.
Wait a minute. Did you find it sad or enraging?
Sad. don't get me wrong, I'm fucking furious.
Right.
But we've spoke off of camera. I know you're a very beautiful soul and a very nice person. So to hear firsthand in detail that you're being subjected to an attempted murder, a torture, and at the same time, you've lost all your energy and faith and even fear and numbness. And when you described the water going down the plug hole in a bath, I could just imagine to the best of my ability. But it's you watching your friend be murdered in front of you. And ordinarily I would ask more detail about that, but...
You can. What do you want to know? I just flew 5.5 hours to talk to you.
Just the process of you looking at your friend alive and then the duration of time as her life is being drained and killed until it's eventually gone. I suppose just for impact and not even shock tactics, just for people to understand the brutality of some of the people that we walk amongst.
Yeah, that's actually a very powerful sentence. Some of the people that we walk amongst. Now, obviously, as an Israeli, we've walked amongst this for decades, and it's been enhanced since October the 7th. And we get to it, and you have people like this on your streets in London calling for globalising the Intifada, right, which is calling for the same barbarity. But I tell you, it's interesting what you say, because it's like a sand, what do you call this? Like sand clock. Is you call it a sand clock? It's like this shaped.
Hourglass,
yeah. Okay, in Hebrew it's a sand clock. It's like you're watching the life drain out of somebody. And it wasn't, I mean, obviously the gore is the cruelty.
And was he plunging into her?
He was more, what do you call it? Like Aladdin, he was like chopping.
Slicing and chopping.
Yeah, it was doing it, but Christine took it all on her heart area, all on her chest area. And so she's tied up and she's trying to do that. But for me, witnessing this, like these live, obviously they leave scars for life. You're not really, that's not something you get over, right? It's not, has a huge impact on somebody's soul. And it's probably going to sound a little strange. It wasn't primarily the gore for me that was so damaging. It was listening to my friend begging and praying and hoping, it's like being a voyeurist, right? There's things in life that we are not created to see. The obvious is, right, you have parents, and there's things that children don't see that their parents do, right? That's just proper and normal. Another thing that we're not created to see, and it would be good to talk about this too, is like we're not made to see somebody murdered. That's not who we are as people. And I'll jump forward a little bit, but like we can watch murder online today, right? You can see it on Telegram, you can see, and I don't think people if they haven't experienced it firsthand, they don't understand what it does to them when they're almost gratifying themselves because there's something so fascinating about death, right? Because we're all gonna end up there. So we can't help but look. But I'm saying, as somebody who's experienced it, do everything not to look at this stuff, because it something in us dies every time we see somebody else die, whether it's online or in reality.
You lose a little bit of your soul. Is that what you refer to as murder porn?
Well, we didn't talk about this before the interview. The murder porn is, and I think what I mean is, I've been a public speaker now for 10 years, right? And I have to tell my story because I want to get to the point where I think is more value than what happened, all right? Like things like we just talked about now, right? The value of life, yeah, not to indulge, not to be pornified with death, right? Because that's what I mean. And personally, the murder porn is, I know, maybe pimping. I know that it feels like sometimes that I have to pimp my story, the gory bit, before people can actually listen to the greater values that I think I've learned having been through what I've experienced. Do you know what I mean? That what qualifies me to tell your thousands of listeners, don't watch death online. You know, it's not doing you any good. The only thing that qualifies me to say that is because I've seen it and I know what it did to me. And people don't realize what it's doing to them. So what I mean by, I should have said murder, pimping murder. I have to like pimp them what happened to me in order to get to a greater value system of like a red light. It's a red light on society. Like, wake up. What are we doing to ourselves, let alone what are other people doing to other people?
So that recollection of what you experienced, and I'll be honest again, I fucking really struggled listening to that. And it's not often that something, I've got pretty thick skin and I've seen some horrendous things that would make most people's heads spin. But I struggled taking that on board. It upset me greatly. I want to echo that. But for you spending 20 minutes telling me your story that nearly led me to bursting out in tears, how on earth have you coped and recovered and even made sense of that horrendous ordeal? How have you got through this?
Well, I think it's a daily thing, right? It's like, I don't ever like to use the word healing because I think it undermines the severity of what happened and it kind of whitewashes their barbarity. But I can say there's progress. It's a great question. First of all, there's something called time. All right, now there's so many cliches, right? Oh, time heals. No, it doesn't. Time doesn't heal, but what it does, I mean, like, I love taking photography, birds, right? Huge bird fan. I know it's a bit nerdy in England, but in Israel, it's really the thing to do. So if you're looking through a camera lens, really long lens, all right, that's what it's like when something immediately traumatic happens. You're looking, and the whole thing that fills the lens is the object itself. I'm looking at Liam now. All right, and all I can see is your beautiful little face in the camera. But as I step back, time-wise, right, let's use the lens. I'm stepping back and back and back. And now I'm looking at your lovely little face, but your little head is a bit smaller in the view screen. You know what I mean? Because I've moved back. So time, we're getting further and further away from the event. And that means that the event itself, the traumatic event, it's only one component at the time, but it allows other things to come into the view screen. So one of the things that came into the view screen with me was suddenly I found myself in the terror club, right? I mean, Israel is riddled with people who've been in terror attacks and survivors, and it's a people of much pain, but much stubbornness to get back to life. But I encountered people who'd been, you know, husbands who've had their children blown up, and suddenly I was mixing with people that, wow, I realized it's not all about me. That was devastating, right? Because we're all so ego-centered. Everything's about me and my suffering. And so one of the things was time. The second thing was to meet other people who suffered. That reduced my sense of self-importance. Another thing that helped me, and this is everything, like I said, everything takes time. Another thing that helped me was, I don't know that you have it in Britain so much, but I think it's starting with the patriot movement. Israel is it's one big dysfunctional family, right? We're a family. We are a big community. You can see it today since October the 7th, right? We know the name of every hostage. We all know their stories. We know what soldier was killed in battle. We know every Israeli knows. We're all on first names terms. So one thing that helped me was that instead of asking like the questions, the questions that you never get answers from, like if you ask God, why me? Then God will probably say, well, why not? In a Yiddish accent. So it's asking the right questions. And I saw myself definitely part of my people. And it was one day in a particular point in Jewish history. We've had this before for millennium. We're having it now in October the 7th. We had it with me and we'll get it in the future. So I saw myself as part of a community, part of a history, part of a present, part of a future. And so those are the three things. And I just touched on it now. The other thing would be knowing the right questions to ask. Because it's normal that when we are hit by tragedy or trauma, we always ask, why me, right? And that's legitimate for a time, but I don't think it's the most helpful question because there's not always an answer. There's just not always an answer, very rarely maybe. So I am as a Jewish person, I think our Bible tells us and can be very helpful things. And the first question in the Hebrew Bible is, there's Adam and Eve, and they're rolling around in the Garden of Eden, and then they steal some fruit, and they weren't supposed to, and then God comes down and he says, Adam. And Adam, by the way, in Hebrew is the same word for humanity. And God says, Adam, where are you? Now, he doesn't mean like, oh, are you under the table? Are you behind the palm tree? He's saying, what have you become that you could do this? How could you rampantly disobey what I told you explicitly not to do? So that kind of question has formulated my path, because instead of asking the questions, why did it happen to me? I spent years speaking about, like, really the terrorists. Like, they weren't born murderers, right? These Muslim Arabs, the people who attacked me, were not born murderers. So the question is, what have you become? How could you hold a machete in one hand, a Marlboro in the other, and hack at innocent women without blinking an eye? And it's not an ontological, philosophical question. Oh, how could you do that? Their whole culture, and we see it today, since October the 7th, their whole culture is riddled with hatred and anti-Semitism. It's in their education. It's in their holiday camps. It's in they get paid. Your taxpayers' monies, by the way, are paying the people who attacked me who are in prison. So you have an incentive and you have a reward, and it's all in the education system. So to go back to your question, I understood that in order to actually not commit suicide, but to have some quality of life, not just to survive, but actually start to live again, I had to make meaning. We must make meaning out of life. And I have to do the little I can with what I felt was left of my life to stop the European monies given to the Palestinian Authority, who then reward these cold-blooded murderers. So I found like a purpose. And there's other factors which have contributed, apart from the time and the friendships and the right questions to ask and the meaning, how I'm going to spend my life. There are other factors too.
Sorry, you said reward. Now, unless I hear it with my own ears or see it with my own eyes, I take most things with a pinch of salt.
For sure.
But I've heard that Palestinian terrorists, they get paid per Jew that they kill.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
So is that correct?
Absolutely. And I'm happy to send you any documents if you want to do a follow-up show with anybody. I'll connect you with people. Absolutely. It's documented.
So the death of Jews is commissioned?
Yeah, it's salaried. It's commissioned. And, as I said, I was born in this country. I mean, I don't live here now, but I did up to high school here. And to think that the people I still know in Britain, and like yourself now, your hard-working money, your taxes. And this is why I asked you in the beginning, are you sad or are you outraged? You see, I'm outraged. Your taxes are paying the people who did what they did to me.
I've now managed to get a grip of my emotions. I was very, very sad when you told me. I mean, fucking hell, I can't emphasise it enough.
Yeah.
But now that I've got a grip of my emotions, apologies for losing them temporarily.
I love men who are in touch with their emotions.
But I'm also fucking outraged.
Yeah.
And I'm angry.
Yeah.
And I'm disappointed in the entire system and the functionality of the world and how this is allowed to go on. And see, at the moment, the Jewish community have got such a bad name. We've got pro-Palestinian marches week in, week out in London. So I suppose what really is going on, because I've also heard the IDF be referred to as the IGF, the Israeli Genocide Force. I don't know what the truth is because I'm not over in Israel or Gaza. I'm here looking at all these different media outlets and being pumped with propaganda from both sides. So from your perspective, that you've lived in amongst the conflict for the last, 17, 18 months? What's really going on over there?
Well, since October the 7th, right? I mean, are you familiar with the what do you call it? The term blood libel. Like in history, like for hundreds and hundreds of years, Jewish people were accused by, old-fashioned Christians. I'm not talking about today. But they're accused by the church that they'd, kill Christian children, use the blood to make the special food we eat at Passover, right? And when these illiterate Christian communities used to hear that, what, you're killing our children, there's a genocide of Christian children. So what they'd do then is they'd come and murder Jews. And this happened all over Europe. That's called a blood libel. And what we hear today, to touch on what you just said about the genocide of these people in Gaza, first of all, it's amazing. Their birth rate's going up, all right? There is no genocide in Gaza. There is no genocide. What is a genocide? It's a targeted elimination of an entire ethnic group to bring about their destruction, right? There is no genocide. You talk to any general. Let's forget the Israeli generals. There's a Colonel Richard Kemp. He was the commander of the British forces in Iraq, right? Super guy. He's still a commander, and he's a military man. And there's another British soldier called Andrew Fox, and they can break down the military stuff. And they say, even in a war situation, the way that Israel takes as much care as possible to avoid as many civilian casualties as possible is unparalleled in the history of military encounters. There is no genocide. I tell you where the genocide is. You know where the genocide is? It was October the 7th in the villages and the little kibbutzes around the Gaza Strip. It was the genocide, the attempted genocide of the Jewish people in the state of Israel. That's where the genocide is. When we had 1,200 Jews slaughtered in cold blood in one day. And if you take that for, like people were comparing it ratio-wise with 9/11, this is like tens and tens of times bigger than 9/11 for a little country like ourselves. I tell you something else, Liam, right? Obviously, the October 7th happened after the Ukrainian-Russian war. I don't ever remember when Russia invaded Ukraine, I don't ever remember anyone in Britain or actually in the Western world saying within 2 days, right, condemning Ukraine for fighting back. I was watching on the Israeli news. I was watching the other day before I came here to prepare for this interview. I was watching the news broadcast that came out on October the 7th, 8th and 9th, right? The massacre happens on October the 7th. What are the newscasters saying? While we're still in turmoil, while we still have terrorists wandering around our villages, the newscasters are saying, because you get in now to the commentary, and they say, well, we have a window Israel has a window of opportunity to respond. What's a window of opportunity? This is what happens every time we're attacked. Israel has only a window. We have a few days to bomb the terrorists or bring down infrastructure. We have a few days to do it before the whole political system turns against us. And we were talking before the interview, right? The fact that you have people in this country, in your country, you have people marching through the streets of London, not far from here, calling to globalize the Intifada. Intifada is what you see on October the 7th. Intifada is the slaughter of the infidels. Intifada is wanting to see this beheading and this murdering and this rape that we experience. That's what these, what did you call them, tossers? Middle class tossers. I love that. That's what these middle class tossers are calling for on the streets of London.
It was probably less polite than that.
We promised we wouldn't say bad words in this interview. No, but really, it's incredible that this is even
I just feel like
allowed.
I feel like people are just marching blindly week in, week out because they're caught up in herd mentality, and they're just disregarding and forgetting stories and situations that you've been through first hand.
These same people have never even been there. There is first of all, there's no such place as Palestine, but we won't even get into that. These people, like these idiots, if you pardon me for saying, the Jeremy Corbyns, the George Galloways, the Owen Jones, they're suddenly, they're asleep for most of the year, and then they hear the word Israel, and they wake up and they're ready for battle. They've never even been here. People who are flying the Palestinian cause. And by the way, I really appreciate your honesty saying, I don't know, what to really believe. Let me help you with the statistics of this supposed genocide of the Gazans, the people of Gaza, let's put it like that. And then we'll get on to the innocent civilians. That every statistic that talks about civilian casualties, where does it come from? From the Gazan side. It comes from Hamas. It comes from the same people, and they're not animals, they're people. That's important to say that. Otherwise, we excuse their wicked deeds. The same people who rape and butcher and slaughter and massacre without blinking an eye are those very same people who then feed the likes of the BBC the statistics for so-called genocide. And I got to tell you, too, there's no starvation in Gaza either. And in fact, the United Nations even reluctantly admitted it. But once the lies go out, it's very hard to get them back.
So the water supply wasn't turned off?
No. In fact, I wanted it to be turned off. I absolutely think that Israel didn't have the moral courage to immediately say we're going to turn off the water and the electricity because we need our hostages back. Why didn't we do that? Because we know that not only we are fighting with Hamas, we might have the sympathy of the world for 24 hours, all right? But we know that the world is going to turn against Israel sooner or later. We're going to get arms embargoes. We're going to get all these lies about hospitals being bombed, and then miraculously that you see them again in Telegram and Twitter. So we're always, Douglas Murray, this very wonderful conservative journalist, and Douglas says something right. He says, Israel always has to fight with one hand tied behind their back. And what was the connection with Ukraine? You never hear those standards for the Ukrainians or Russians, ever.
It's funny you mentioned Douglas Murray because, in my opinion, Douglas Murray is a posh Tommy Robinson. And when you were talking about the political commentators that will air their views on the Israeli conflict, and you quite rightly say none of them have been there. I am aware of a journalist that decided to actually take a trip there for themselves and visit both camps. And that journalist is Tommy Robinson.
Tommy, right? Tommy Robinson, darling Tommy Robinson. So I can't remember what year. I think it was 2016. Now, I was still kind of highly traumatized. It was 6 years after the terrible murder. But I wanted to get back to something, something to look forward to. And a friend of mine said, look, obviously you can't guide every month. That's too much. But there's an English guy called Tommy Robinson, and you might really enjoy guiding him. So I didn't know. I've been out of England a long time, right? So I look in the internet, what do you say, Google, Tommy Robinson. And I think, oh, this, all I could find on the internet was that he was a thug, he was a racist, he was a Nazi. Now, as a tour guide, I actually don't care. I mean, I've guided all kinds of interesting people. Just have to make sure that when they're in Israel or anywhere, really, there has to be a certain measure of courtesy and decorum. What they do in their own life isn't really of any interest to me. And I read about Tommy and I thought it must be like that for a reason. And he kind of fascinated me. And then this Brian of London, as he likes to go by, he said, read Tommy's book. And he gave me Tommy's book, Enemy of the State. First of all, I read the book. I'm a reader. I'm not a TV person. I love reading books. And I have to say, it was magnificent. The way it was written, I could hear Tommy's voice, right? And that's the beauty of any great book. It's like you're in the room with that person and they're just like that little worm in your ear. But what Tommy wrote was so contradictory to what I was reading on the internet. It didn't make sense. But I felt that in the book, Tommy's voice was very authentic. But you know what? People are people, and we all put on our best side, right? So I thought, yeah, I want to spend some time with this person. And I was living in a very small town in the desert in a one-roomed apartment. And so Tommy comes, and of course he brings his mates. He brings, like, for a racist, he brings a black man.
The irony.
Wow, what a racist. And another really nice guy. And then, of course, my friend Brian and another friend, Ken. And then I've got a Muslim Arab friend who wanted to meet Tommy, 𝐬𝐽𝐻𝐿. Shout out for 𝐬𝐽𝐻𝐿. He's now an Arab and he's fighting Arab terrorists in Gaza at the moment as I speak. Great young man. So anyway, I think Tommy and his team came for like 8 days. And I got to tell you, I think it was the first time I really laughed since the attack, like really laughed at stuff. I mean, it was just so nice I learned new swear words. I mean, like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. But more than that, right? I mean, Tommy was very, very keen to meet all kinds of people, not just Jews. He wanted to meet Druze. He wanted to meet Christians, Arab Christians. He wanted to meet Muslims. I think they spent half a day camel racing with some Muslim Bedouin and just see Tommy laughing around with them. And just watching, like we are on our best behavior, but when you start getting tired, you get niggly, that's when you really see who people are. And I didn't see there wasn't 1 ounce of racism or bigotry in the man. But more than that, Liam, more than that. And it's a little like talking to you now, right? Because Tommy knew what had happened to me, but I hadn't told him, right? He knew, Brian had said. And when I told Tommy, he had that, he did what you did. He cried. And I asked him the same question. I said, are you sad or are you angry? And he answered me exactly what you said, that he's sad, but he was so fucking angry, right?
Yeah, you speak freely on this.
No, I am, and I don't usually use that because overuse is not good. But they're people can be more offended at the F word than they are at the fact that somebody's been nearly butchered to death. You know what I mean? And that's an inverse moral priority. So what really touched me with Tommy, apart from that, he was an incredibly decent human being. We were all cooped up. I was in the one bedroom, and then all the guys were, I don't know, sleeping all over the place. But they're incredibly courteous to me. It was really very touching. But when I told Tommy my story, this is what impacted me. And I saw it now. I've seen it echoed in you. I saw he didn't have to say it. It was his compassion. Like, I feel it with you. Like, I wish I'd have been there. That's what I can feel. If I'd have been there, I'd have kicked the shit out of them or whatever, right? I saw his desire, his mercy of protecting those who can't protect themselves. And I saw his rage at the sheer injustice of it all. And that, for me, that is what makes Tommy such a beautiful human being. He has such a cry, such a anguish, desire for justice. There must be justice. Like wrong is wrong, and black is black, and white is white, and evil people should be punished. And on the other hand, it's like, if I think of all the work Tommy's done with, his film Silenced, and speaking to these people who've been abused and raped, and watching Tommy interview these people and the compassion he shows. And I've listened to people, who were so-called pro-Tommy, and they'll always say, well, it's not like I support everything he did, but he's like a good guy. But Tommy, to me, is the man with the people. It's almost like he's got an unforgivable past, like these holier-than-thou people who will judge him on something that he did 20 years ago. Like, get a grip. And I don't think Tommy gets enough credit for the exposure of these Muslim gangs, jihadist gangs, which is what that is.
I wanted to ask you, from living outside of the UK now, looking in at the biggest scandal that I can ever remember, the most appalling, despicable, unforgivable cover-up of young British, and it appears Sikh girls being institutionally raped by gangs of predominantly Pakistani Muslim men. Let's not beat around the bush calling them grooming gangs or Asian gangs. I'm well aware that there's independent rapists in the UK, and the majority of them are white British males that look just like me. I'm not defending them. I'll call them out, my own father being one of them, as you know. But let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Absolutely.
What's your view? What's your take, your perspective on what the hell is going on in the UK that's been going on for decades and being completely covered up? Again, I'm I'm very much a justice warrior, and I do feel people's pain as an empath, and I hate to see people being ill-treated. And what really infuriates me, if we're going to now move from sadness to fucking rage, it's the rape of our children could have been avoided. Like, you fucking animals that covered that up. You're as bad as the rapists yourselves, and you're staying silent to protect your career. You piece of shit. So what would be, as a female as well...
I love your rage. I love it. It's so healing. So gorgeous.
Thank you.
Really.
As a female, how do you perceive that? Okay,
so I don't almost feel it's necessary on your show, but I just like to say, as a Jew, as an Israeli, I've actually hidden Muslim teenagers in my house because they were having death threats from other Muslims, all right? It was a Muslim surgeon who saved my life. Is that all clear? I've set up a project in a so-called refugee camp with a Palestinian Muslim to educate children. You can't get me on the racism card, right? As a female, as a human being, I think that what's happening in this country has been happening for decades. It's a conquest of culture.
I also want to say, before you go on, I'm also not accusing all Muslims.
No, for sure.
I have, just like you, I have some very, very good Muslim friends. And I mean, my podcast has actually led to some quite interesting conversation with my Islamic friends. So yeah, I just want to, just in case I come across like I'm completely anti-Islam.
No, I don't hear you say that. But Islam has to reform. Well, I don't know if it can be reformed. But
there is an issue within that ideology. That's irrefutable.
Islam is the issue. Islam, it's a 7th century Islam. And the thing about these grooming gangs, these rapes, it would be even better to label it by what these Muslims label it themselves, right? In the Quran, the Muslim holy book, it talks about... when you talk about jihad, and don't listen to any liar who say, oh, it's just a spiritual jihad. Jihad is first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people, first the Jews, then the Christians, all right? Submission. Islam means submission. It doesn't mean peace. So what we're talking about with this raping by Muslim gangs is a form of jihad that appears in the Quran. We're talking about a 7th century Islam. where Muslims, Liam, you see it now. We saw it on October the 7th with the Israeli women hostages, right? And they were raped, people raped in their own villages before they were murdered. And you see it in the Hamas, and it's relevant for England, but you see it in the Hamas GoPro footage. You hear them say in Arabic, take her, she's a sex slave, kill this one. They recorded it. You could see this, right? Take this one, she's good for sex. Take this one, she's good for murder. So the idea that you take sexual slaves in Islam is a form of jihad. And what people are not doing in this country is calling it for what it is. Okay, they're predominantly Pakistani, all right? But it's not because they're predominantly Pakistani that they're taking young girls as jihadic sex slaves. It's because they're following the credence of 7th century Islam. It's not just child sexual exploitation. And it is the elephant in the room. And until people can actually say this and look it in the eye, I don't think it's going to happen, certainly under this government. But there needs to be an empowerment. I think did you interview Raja Mir?
I've interviewed Anne Sammy Woodhouse, who was a victim of the grooming gang.
Okay. Wonderful people. Now, Raja, he's quite happy to say he's a cultural Muslim, all right? But most of the Muslims in this country are quiet. They're silent. And in that sense, they're not relevant. So my understanding is we have to call it for what it is, which is a form of jihad, and get behind people like Raja. Because Raja says, there are many in the Muslim community who are horrified by this. So these people who are horrified have to be empowered to speak up and to speak out. Because until they feel empowered, then I don't think anything's going to change.
I'm big on people calling out their own community.
Yeah.
So when I asked Raja, what's the consequences of you speaking out against Islam? And he said, death, they'll kill me. When there's like an Islamic terrorist attack, I don't hear imams putting their face to camera, condemning it and raving their fist in disgust, saying...
No, that's not.
So why don't they do that?
That's not that. Well, first of all, the ones who don't raise their fist in disgust, right? I think they're actually quite happy with what's going on. I think it's okay to say that. It's absolutely okay to say that. Not that it's okay what they're saying, but yeah, I think and what you have here, you really have it's what's called in Islam, it's called stealth jihad. It's not like suddenly, well, I don't know what's going to happen now, but it's not like you have hundreds of thousands of Muslims coming in and they're just all going to start stabbing everybody all at once, right? That's not happening. You've had things for years where the Muslims will take over education, cultural institutions. They'll buy out. Britain used to have all these amazing, beautiful brick churches, right? Stone churches in countryside. It's kind of, people say this is a Christian country. It's probably a post-Christian country since World War II. But when these churches are no longer used, the Muslims will buy the buildings. Now, people need to get educated about Islam, need to get educated, because when the Islamists take over a building, a Christian building, it's a theological statement.
Dominance.
Yes, and you saw the other day where was it? Was it Westminster, where instead of having the Christian ceremony of Lent, they were
celebrating Ramadan.
Yeah, and that is a disaster. That is a cultural enforcement of submission. And the people in this country don't understand. They just think, oh, that's nice. So it's like multicultural. Sorry, it doesn't work. So when you talk about imams, like if people speak out, that's a death sentence. Well, those people in that community who are willing to carry out that death sentence should be in prison, or they should be deported, because you cannot have two systems of law here. You cannot have British law and Sharia law, right? What is this, that people can't speak out in Britain because they're going to be killed? That there are Muslims who are fearful that they're going to be killed? Wherever the threat is coming from, they should be arrested yesterday. They're not suitable to be in this country. And no, it's not racist to say it. It's common sense. Saving your country.
And it's also we're not even talking about a race here. We're talking about it's an ideology. And so here's a question for you, from your perspective and your intel on the entire ideology, because you've lived amongst it for many, many years, and you're right in the middle of the conflict. So there's probably not many people more qualified than you. So as you know, we've had a huge surge of illegal migrants invading the UK, in my opinion. I believe it's orchestrated. There's no other reasonable explanation for this to take place on such a grand scale. They're being housed in hotels with their own GPs, etc. They're unvetted. There's no paperwork. We don't know anything about them. In your opinion, knowing what you know and sort of the operation of these groups, do you think the UK should be on high alert? And when I say that, we're now flooded with illegal migrants with a very different belief system to ours, mostly Islamic. Do you think we need to be taking into consideration that at some stage there could be an orchestrated terrorist attack from within en masse, be it they target people's homes all at once across Europe, or they target the church en masse across Europe? It's a fear and a concern that I've had personally, and I would just wonder if that's something that you've ever considered, or what your thoughts would be on that.
Just eavesdrop on the conversations of the migrants themselves. It's not what I think, it's what are they saying. And they say it very clearly. This is going to be, the imams say it, this is going to come under Islam. This country is going to eventually be an Islamic nation. And whether they do that by the sword or cultural conquest or by hundreds of thousands of children, non-Muslim children being, it's all Islamic conquest. So yes, it's coming, it's speeding up. I don't know how that will work out. Certainly don't want to prophesy anything. I'm not qualified to do that. But just by listening to what they themselves say, they're saying that this country will ultimately submit to Islam. And if you look at the history of Islam, you have to see how different countries buckled and ended up coming under Islamic rule.
What's the purpose of, I'm going to very quickly go back to the horrendous event that you experienced. There's just not a strong enough word to describe what you went through. So I'm just going to say experience. I took great notice when you said that they were screaming Allah Akbar. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be a common theme when any terror attack takes place in the UK. We now are pretty certain that the Southport murderer that was reading Al-Qaeda manuals shouted Allah Akbar during his massacre of children. I mean, that is what they shout when they're killing innocent people. Allah Akbar, which means God is great. Why on earth would somebody shout out as they're massacring somebody that God is great? What's the link there?
It's like you've already touched on it. It's Allah is great, by the way, not God is great. Allah is not my God, with all due respect.
Nor mine.
No. And I don't think Allah is that great. I think he's not even all right. I think anybody, if anything's going to be ratified and encouraged under this kind of primitive theology, there's nothing great about that kind of God. I think he's a pervert. If that's what their God is telling them to do, I think it's perverted. And
isn't that a good enough reason? Going back to sort of like the imams shaking their fists with fury because they're disgusted about what one of their fellow Muslim brothers has just done. Now, the repeated use of the word Allah Akbar after murdering and torturing an innocent person, to me that would be enough for an imam to say, whoa, what on earth are you using those words for when you're killing innocent people? But again, I don't hear them say that. Because
7th century Islam, which is what this is in a 21st century Europe, it's a primitive and barbaric culture. And you don't forget the Jews, forget the Christians. Look how these people treat their own families. Look how they treat their wives. Look how these same imams who are preaching death. It's a culture that loves and glorifies death. Judaism loves and glorifies life. And I would hope that Christianity does the same, all right? We already see, even though we're in the middle of a war, in Israel, we see people, we're planting our fields again, right? We're gathering together and trying to heal as a nation because we love life. Life is to be sanctified. We sanctify life. They sanctify death. So if their God is a God of death, Allah is a God of death. That kind of Islam, 7th century Islam, it's one of death, right? So is that really compatible with the kind of Great Britain or this country? Is that really the kind of people and the ideology you want here? It has no place in British culture. None. I can't see it. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. And this repeating Allahu Akbar, it's like, yeah, we're better than you. We're going to make you submit in the end. You see it everywhere. And by the way, the migrants that you talked about, Liam, I mean, you've seen what's going on in Syria, and you won't hear it on the mainstream media. There's like
Christian genocide.
Christian genocide, Alawite genocide, Yazidi genocide, Kurdish genocide, Druze genocide, like all these minorities are being slaughtered in cold blood, and you won't hear anything about that on the media.
No, and that's the beauty of having a platform like this, because you do get fed information, and not just information, but actual hardcore evidence that's irrefutable and undeniable that keeps you awake at night of what's going on. So I knew immediately what you said when you said what's going on in Syria, because I've seen it with my own eyes. But the mainstream media, they don't report that, which, I mean, who knows what their agenda is. But before I ask my final question, where can people find you? Have you got websites? Have you got a book?
That's very nice of you to offer me that opportunity. I actually have a website. It's very easy. It's my name, Tal Hartuv. TalHartuv.com. And I'm on Facebook under that name, although that's for old people, I realize. I'm on Instagram, which I'm just trying to get into again. And I'm on X, which I'm trolling you all the time, by the way. You never like my comments. Never.
Things will change now. I'm going to love your comments.
So, yeah, that's actually X is where, I mean, it can be very poisonous, all these social platforms and stuff, but they're important because you don't get... Oh, can I ask your viewers, your fans, can I ask them one favour?
Please.
More than following me? With all my heart, cancel your BBC licence because it is a platform for terrorism. Please... You know what? Whoever cancels their BBC licence, come to Israel. I'll give you a free tour.
Well, that means you owe me a free tour.
Yeah, absolutely. Cancel the licence. That would be amazing if you can do that.
Okay. Final question. You have stared death in the face. A lot of people think they're having a bad day, and then they hear a story like yours and they realise that actually things could be a lot worse. But there are also people out there, as you've quite rightly said, that they're suffering with their own pain, their own trauma, their own misery. What would you say to somebody out there that's really, really struggling with a previous experience? Just a little word of wisdom just to get them through, even if it's just another day. What would your message be to them?
I don't know. I'd look at them and I'd say, I'm so sorry you're going through this. So sorry. And then if I lived nearby, I'd invite myself around and I'd just see if they got food in the fridge. You know, if maybe take them out for a little walk or go for a beer or, you know, just be a friend. People like that need friends. One thing that was really helpful to me, Liam, is when I was speaking, doing this public speaking, it's like a metamorphosis of character, right? Because the terror attack, it just shattered my whole world. I mean, I couldn't even remember what I was like before. You know, everything I was, a tour guide, a jazz pianist, a fun friend, you know, a bit of a laugh. I couldn't remember what I was like. And when I did start public speaking, I was always introduced as, and it was right. It was right because that's what I was, and in a sense am, but a victim of terror. But it made my skin crawl. You know, I'm such an independent person anyway, and like, oh my God, it's like there's nothing more helpless as being shackled in perpetual victimhood. So I changed the narrative, and I'll be like, yeah, I'm a survivor. And then I thought, okay, that too, but that's not who I am. It's part of who I am. I'm just me. I'm just Tal. And I realized that these events, this is the answer of the question, apart from, sorry, can I get you some food from Marks and Spencer's? But it would be like, what happened to me? It's certainly formative in how I think and how I speak and what how I process life. But it doesn't define me. It's what happened to me. Other stuff happened to me in my life, good stuff, and some bad stuff. But it's not who I am. It's what happened to me. So people who struggle, and I know people struggle. Where's the camera? Can I look in the camera? Is this the camera, Simon? He's been very well behaved. Simon?
That's the camera.
Listen, if you're struggling, all right, it's really important to know. Take it one step at a time. Reject perpetual victimhood, all right? And this isn't who you are. It's what happened to you, and there's a lot of other great things out there.
Well, on a final note from me, I want to say sincerely from the heart, but I've got nothing but love, respect, and admiration for you. And before I thank you for coming on, I hope the audience has stuck through to the very end, because you really have added value and strength. And I'd like people to keep liking and subscribing to this channel, because the bigger the channel, the more important a guest I can bring on and platform their story. And, you know, people with powerful stories, they're more inclined to want to go on bigger platforms. And I won't shy away from anything. And the bigger the platform I've got, it's an absolute pleasure and honour to put someone's story out there and support them within. But the most important thing is you. I am so fucking in awe of you. And I thank you for trusting me with your story, and also sticking with me when I had my wobble, and then bringing the rage out of me as well. So I've really enjoyed this. And like I say, nothing but love and respect. And thank you.
Yes.
God bless you, my love.
Thanks, Liam.
Thank you.
Thank you.